Thank you very much for listening to the Voice of Job Seekers podcast, and welcome back. If you're joining us from last year and prior years, and welcome if you're just joining us for the first time. My name is Mark, and I am the founder of this podcast and blog and videos and all that kind of stuff. If you want to know more about it, just go to thevoiceofjobseekers.com. You can find a plethora of resources, including my ebook, which is free. Sign up for 421 Modern Job Search Tips 2021. I almost forgot what year it was. Anyway, glad that you're able to find value for those of you who have been coming back, and hopefully your job search has benefited from the information you've heard here in the content, my guests, myself, and others. You can also look forward to hearing some other content I've been providing elsewhere, other podcasts and future episodes. I'll probably play a snippet from those and then share the link. If you don't know already, if you don't follow me on LinkedIn, you probably don't know that I host or co-host 2 live stream shows that come on weekly. One on Wednesday, one on Friday. Wednesday, we don't have a name for yet, though we are pretty close to having one. You'll hear more about that in the next week or so. The other one is the Modern Job Search Checklist. Myself and Demian Burkle and I co-host a show that offers help to job seekers, as well as the one I just mentioned. My other co-host is Jack Kelly. And that's on Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Central. Today's show is actually a clip from that show. It was so good where we talked about job search trends for 2021. If you followed me throughout the years, I have one of those shows every year where we talk about the trends. And this year is Jack Kelly, myself, and Hannah Morgan. Hopefully you'll get a lot of value out of that. We dive deep into remote work and a couple other subjects, and we really get pretty deep, and probably could have gone on for hours, but instead I'm bringing you a clip. I'll also link to the actual live stream if you want to look at the actual stream, video stream that's on LinkedIn. You can always just go to my page on LinkedIn, Mark Anthony Dyson, and follow me there, or you can connect with me. Just send me a note, and that'll be good enough. In the meantime, I don't want to delay this too much. The other announcement I meant to mention, I'm going to mention it now before I forget. I am a part of a program for a workforce millionaire. I'll link to it, and I'll link to it so that you can see it. I may have even a little post a little bit later on this week about it. But it's a free event, and there's about 17 speakers in total. I get to talk about job search and how much of a lifestyle it needs to be successful for the rest of your life. So if you want to hear content like that, things that will help boost your career, there are 17 speakers. The free event will happen on Sunday, starting early in the morning. And I'll post the registration link so that you can go and register for the event if you want. If you just listen to a little bit of it, you'll be able to have something to take home and be useful for your job search. So, the live stream again that I'm presenting today was done back in early December, late November, I believe. And we're discussing job search trends of 2021. Listen to it. You'll find some very interesting insights from both Jack and Hannah. I just kind of hang out as a third wheel in a way. But there's a couple of things I've said that I thought were pretty interesting. Anyway, thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks where we're going to be talking about the resume trends of 2021 with Ashley Watkins. I have her back from last year since you guys enjoyed it so much. So looking forward to that as well. Talk to you later. Enjoy the show.
Pretty
Absolutely.
cool, pretty informative, sharing a lot of information. We have
Absolutely.
Hannah here, so
And
now it's awesome.
Am I
yes,
frozen? I look frozen. Am I frozen?
Oh no, you're moving. You're awesome.
Okay, I'm not moving.
yeah, it's gonna look different than if you're looking at it on like another device. It's
Yeah.
gonna look a little bit different. It's like a little time lapse. In
Oh,
case
right. Okay.
anybody
Got a little
else,
delay.
yes, just a slight delay. So you can't pay too much attention to what's going on there.
Okay.
But I definitely want everyone else to enjoy the show. So Hannah Morgan is our guest, as Jack already said. She is the career Sherpa. She is also a contributor to U.S. News and World Report. She's also a nationally recognized career writer, advice, and is willing to consult with anybody and everybody. She's been giving free information for so many years. So all these years with between Jack and Hannah and myself, it's a lot of decades. So we'll just go put it that way.
It is a lot of talking, but shh.
Yeah, don't
You
tell
just made us feel
anybody.
old, Mark. Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, I'm included in that in
Yeah.
that, by the way. But nevertheless, I want you, those who are watching, if you like what you're hearing, join us and have your friends join us as well. And as we begin to dig into some really great stuff, we got it all finalized. Of course, we don't know always what's going to happen here. So probably the first thing we're going to talk about is some of the obvious things that we've seen go from 0 to 60 all at one time, or maybe 60 to 100, is remote work. Remote work has gone way up and is still trending still. And in fact, there are companies who have started to make remote work a part of their regular routine and their standard now. And there are others who are still trying to get back into the office. So a lot of job seekers, and I think one of the questions we had early on is how much remote work will there be coming up in 2021 and maybe even going forward? Are we going to see it trend up some? Are we going to see it scale back? And how can people find those jobs? And we'll start with Hannah. What do you think,
Ooh,
Hannah?
yay. So there are pros and cons of remote work, but overall, I'm super excited for job seekers that are in the hunt right now, and even if they're sort of
Mhm.
employed and looking, remote work opens up a world of opportunities that we didn't have access to before because of geographical restriction. So I think that is a great thing. We were forced to, the world was forced to embrace remote working. There were no alternatives. And what employers are finding, and this is the good news, is that they like it. Like it's not as bad as they thought it was going to be. People are actually, and the data is out, people are more productive. And so it's really a win for the employers. Now, there are some downsides. People and employees miss the water cooler. They miss the association. They going into the office. A lot of people are feeling disconnected, isolated. There's that whole, how do I manage my young children and my family and all the other stuff going on at home while I work? Well, there's a lot of challenges. This is my prediction. We're waiting for this vaccine. Nobody's really going to be really going back to work until that's been implemented. But even after it's been implemented, I think that employers are going to be more open in the choices they give their employees in certain roles and in certain companies, in certain industries. They're going to need that to stay competitive and to attract employees moving forward that have been lured into and really want that remote work. So I don't think it's going to go away. But I think that later in 2021, early 2022, we're going to see, some companies like bringing people into the office. So we'll see more of that when they can.
All right, Jack, what
Yeah,
do you
I would
think?
I would echo what Hannah was saying. I think it's going to be kind of this hybrid system where you'll have people who want to come in could come in. You have people who want to come in maybe 3 days a week could do that. You have others who are still going to be concerned, even if they have a vaccine, about coming in for health reasons. Maybe someone in their family is immune compromised, so they want to play it safe. And the company is going to have to. I think a lot of companies aren't going to have a choice because what are you going to do to say to somebody, oh, okay, we you have to be in, but if you come in and you
Mhm.
give it to your family, they'll get sick. There's probably legal liability. So the way I see it is kind of a little bit of everything. And as I think Hannah pointed out, some companies might want more certain types of people in there. They may not have much of a choice, but others kind of some sort of interesting combination. And it could also be staggering the days too, where maybe you come in earlier in the day, leave earlier, instead of the 9 to 5, so you don't have everybody in it all at once. I probably what will happen 2, 3, 4 years from now, we might revert back, or we'll realize, hey, you know what? This is kind of cool to have it set up this way, that I don't have to get into traffic 5 days a week. Maybe I go 3 days a week. I don't have to get in wake 6 o'clock in the morning to get in there 9 o'clock. I could come in maybe a little later, a little earlier, which I think is really healthy for people. But here's what I think. Here's one of the things that I'm a little worried about is this. I've definitely seen with Twitter, with Facebook, with other companies, they'll say, hey, you can work remotely, you can work from anywhere. But then they also say, hey, this is great because we could hire talent from wherever. And it's, to me, being a cynical guy, it's almost a threat, even though I don't think they're saying it as a threat, but it just feels as if what they're laying out is now, instead of having to hire someone in Silicon Valley or New York City, we can go to Kansas, we can go to Wyoming and hire people, which is good. But then you could arbitrage the job market. So you could find people in whatever cities that are low-cost cities, pay them less than somebody else. And then when you're looking for a job, it's a double-edged sword. Theoretically, you could apply to companies outside of your commuting distance, but then also you could be so much more competition. So, I mean, what do you guys think about? Because I think that's something that's not talked about a lot, but it has the elements of both being positive, but could be a big problem for people.
Oh, I think that's going to be the deal.
Yeah.
Let me just be straight.
So you're not even thinking you're like dead. It's like it's
without question that somebody from a third world country is going to be paid their local job market.
That's what's scary. That it goes even next step. See, I'm not even going there, but you're taking it a step further, I guess.
I told you I was going there.
We're going to go out to some other place, and then they'll pay even a fraction, which will be challenging, problematic for here in the U.S.
Yeah, I mean, really, parts of the world, they're more science focused than the United States, and we can look at some of the studies that have shown over the years, and especially recent years, how the United States has really fallen off as far as science and technology training. Now, we can argue whether that actually has happened, but we've seen some evidence, and there's some of them surveys out there, that in the world's place, we're no longer the sole number one in those particular areas. So there are going to be people who actually have lived school here, can go home and still get a job in Silicon Valley. That is going to be the real deal, unless, of course, there's some technology that's possibly, if maybe TikTok might be an indication, there might be some sectioning off, which I kind of doubt that will happen. But in response to some other things that may happen around the world, that technology is worldwide. It's not just particularly here in the world. As long as it's worldwide, the market is very much open to anybody having a job in San Diego or Simi Valley, and they live in India, Jakarta, or Nigeria.
But here's the problem, Mark. Here's the problem. There are laws that prevent companies from hiring people who need a visa, right? So if they're working remotely, do they still need a visa? Do they still need, what's that form? I think unless there's a special arrangement that company sets with them, they're still going to need that visa to work for a company in the United States. So we're going to see some laws, some rules around that. Because working virtually for a company isn't necessarily meaning you're in the company, you're doing work virtually. And I think there's already some stuff around that. The other thing that I've heard is that companies are talking about developing policy around what the pay scale is going to be if they aren't resident in that city where the company is located. So there's lots of conversation going on in advance of all of this stuff, because companies realize there's an advantage to paying somebody a cheaper wage because they're working out of Kansas, but they can't they can't keep that going, right? If you're always trying to hire people that are cheaper in other parts of the country, how does that dissolve the quality of your company and the relationships they have and all that other stuff? So I think companies are trying to develop policy on what they pay people who are working solely remotely.
You're so right, Anna. Yeah, you're so right. So I'll give you an example. With Reddit, they exactly did that. They said, hey, if to have every people working remotely, and if you're in fill in the state, we're going to pay you the same we would pay someone who's working in San Francisco and living in San Francisco. Same in New York. So they promised to do that. But with Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, now this goes back a few months, when he was talking about this trend, he was saying, hey, if you relocate out, you have to report to your manager where you're moving to, and then we're going to readjust your salary accordingly. So it's going to be interesting how that plays out. And Mark just scared the hell out of me by saying about, because I really wasn't even thinking that, but let's be honest, the companies the way they are to save money, you could see them trying to.
That's exactly my argument. My argument is that the nature of large companies and large entrepreneurs, they look for the loopholes. And believe me, there's some gaping loopholes as it is. And there are also biases. And the biases can turn around, and the biases is going to be in reverse orders that we can hire those. The issue is we don't have to hire at the same costs. And after you figure out that insurance is going to be down, the liability insurance of having somebody physically in the building will be down. To rent the building will be down. And possibly even though there's, and Victoria, I appreciate her saying that there could be international tax implications, which we've already hovered over, but already there are businesses who are running virtual businesses over in the Philippines and paying them at the fraction of the cost. So
right, they're outsourcing that work, Mark, and a lot of, and we saw what happened. The companies that were outsourcing a lot of that call center work brought a lot of it back or found other countries because the quality of the work wasn't there. So I think that's where I'm saying, companies can try and hire cheaper labor from somebody somewhere else, and in the long run, I bet you they'll be back because that's hasn't proven to be as effective. You pay for what you get.
Well,
What you pay for, right?
You get what you pay for, but this isn't virtual. So we're talking about actually people who've come to the United States to get that education and then are going back home to their native country and be able to take a job with them. That's what's going to be slightly different, is that it can't be a random person on Fiverr that has edited a few videos for you and you think that they're so good you can hire them. There's some competency that's already in place, so to speak, because they've had that exposure internationally and working with other countries as well, that they may have even a value add in hiring as far as experience ratio, which would be a whole lot better as opposed to virtual assistant than hiring somebody from the United States because of that difference in pay. So that's all I can. Otherwise, ideally, in ideal world, U.S. jobs should be for U.S. citizens. Not particularly that way, because we know the entrepreneurs will find the loophole to the tax code, so to speak. And they may get taxed on one end, but they're gonna overcompensate on something else, and it may not be particularly quality. And that's what's going to be scary, is they can get the same quality from Scandinavia than they can from just being a local guy going to Harvard.
It'll be interesting to see what happens with that. I think it's all going to be reactive. I mean, I don't think there's a lot that we can do proactively. I think that as long as we're having this conversation and other people are aware that the search for talent is global, it's not regional, as like it used to be. I think that's the big takeaway from this, is that people have to up their game, up their skills, be top notch. You can't just do a mediocre job and expect people are going to want to hire you.
Yes, and that's the other part I want to kind of address too, as we're talking about this, is to talk about how can people get these jobs, or and it's going to be different per industry, but people are interested that I want to work remote. I would love to work remote. How can I get a remote job? And I think a lot of it, I mean, some of it's going to be, depending on your industry, that's going to be built into the industry already, that whatever job you get is going to be industry. But the other jobs that perhaps you're going to be involved with, that you like to be involved with, is going to be remote. That position may not have been created yet. So people are wondering, how can I get one of those remote jobs? And there's going to be some things that are going to look a little different now, because
Yeah.
it's not, you can't, you one, I don't think those jobs are going to be advertised like they have in the past.
So it's
I
interesting you say
definitely
that,
am.
Mark, because like I'm
Yeah.
curious how to what you see too, because you would think that given what we were talking about, that
Hmm.
when people would apply to jobs outside of their area, let's say, you're living in New Jersey and you see this job in San Francisco or Chicago. But what I'm hearing from job seekers is that they're saying, no, no, we want someone local, which you scratch your head because wait a minute, if everyone's working remotely, why do you need somebody to be in Chicago if everyone's working remotely? And so it's because I would suggest to people to say that, hey, if you see this great job and it's not within your commuting distance, try and go for it. Let them know, you want to work remotely. And so far, I really haven't seen that many people come back to me and say, Jack, yes, that worked. What are you seeing that, Hannah? Like, what are you hearing? What are you seeing?
I'm seeing a lot of the same stuff that companies are asking for local talent or like regional talent because I think honestly, Jack, I think a lot of the companies are just old and set in their ways and they don't want to
That's,
try
yeah.
something new. Um, and
You know
and
what? You're
and
so right.
and I think the other thing is they're thinking, companies, employers are thinking, you know what, 21, I'm bringing everybody back into the office, right? I don't think that they're really thinking long term, how do we rebuild this in a better way? So I think it's just a lot of the same old is really what my gut tells me. Because indeed, LinkedIn, they've all now given their job boards, their job postings, the ability to search for those things, post jobs remotely, which they didn't do pre-pandemic so well. So that's now an option. Go to the search engines let you search by remote work.
See, I think you hit on something so important. It's you have this edifice, this corporate monolith that it just this is how we've always done things. We're always going to do things. They make changes begrudgingly, and I think if I agree with you, I think a lot of them, given their choice, they're going to say, you know what? Nah, we want you to be here. We want you to be in the office.
Yeah, I think though, I think we kind of, so much for the old companies who still might be faxing in resumes or having people faxing resumes. But I think though there's a shift now that people are starting to put systems in place. They just may be slow in adapting. But I think ultimately that by 2021, they're going to say, forget it. We got to be able to compete in the marketplace. And really, as you think about it, every company has an opportunity to be global just by one decision, for the fact that they can just put on the internet and have things automated in such a way. And no telling, there's the fact that these ideas of artificial intelligence and how that's going to work in making things more automated, how that's going to come into play too. I think people are going to go, they're going to go kicking and screaming. And the ones who win are going to the ones who have gone the fastest and made that quick transition. And I think as a job seeker, if I'm interested, I'm going to be one to go, the guys who have made the transition and are telling other people how to do it. That's probably where I would go if I was looking for a job today. I'd be very interested and I'd be watching and making my company list and targeting companies and becoming a whole lot more interested in how they conduct business. Start talking to people who work within that company and see how they're operating from home and see what kind of software they're wearing and know what that software does, know the difference between the competitive softwares, between how they work and how somebody else works and their competition. There's just so many factors that we could factor in. I think that the thing that you'll have to think about as a job seeker is that who's going to win the battle of the will, so to speak. And maybe you might want to take on a company that's not quite making that transition because you know what it's like to make that transition. and you can use that experience to leverage and make that as a carrot for a company who may want you and your experience in that transition.
So you've made a really good point, Mark, is that the job seekers that are really going to win with a lot of the uncertainty in the world today are the ones who've done their research and the ones who've identified targets and companies that they want to work
Right.
for.
Hmm.
Because that is the name of the game. I mentioned job boards because that's just, a common thing to talk about, but the real
Hmm.
successful job seekers are the ones who create that target list of companies they'd like to work for, they think they'd like to work for, they do the research, they do the intel, they have the conversations, and they understand what the pros and cons are of that company, where they are in the adoption to working remotely. Those job seekers that get all that, they're going to come out on top.
Yeah, absolutely. Jack, last
No,
thought.
I'm with both you guys, and I wonder too. The last thing I guess I would add, will probably see companies that can position themselves as remote work only, as almost like a sales tool to get people to come aboard or interested in that. So if I mentioned Reddit before. So let's say they just decide, hey, we're only going to be remote. That's it. That's going to be highly attractive to people. So they may be able to hire great talent because they're living wherever they're living and say, hey, this is fantastic. I could be by the beach and work and do whatever job I'm doing. And they may win out. They may get better companies than like JP Morgan, who, what was it, last month? I'm losing track of time in COVID years. So where they would say, hey, we want everybody back into the office, where it's very, you can tell like there's not going to be a lot of, room moving forward, and it'll be a clear delineation and people could choose, what do I want to do? And I think what you said earlier, yeah, some people like being into the office and the camaraderie and what have you. Others like, I could do without it. I'd rather not commute. So
Here's the thing though, Jack, everybody likes choice.
yes,
Right, we all prefer choice, right? So that's one of the great things that we've now been exposed to, that we have choice, right? The choice is I cannot work or I can work remotely, right? When the company says you have no choice, you have to work here, there's no choice,
and it could be a
right?
turnoff. It could
Yeah,
actually boomerang, right? Because then he's like, you know what? There are a lot of companies out there, and if you're not giving me a choice, well, I'll go somewhere else.
yeah, that's going to give
Well,
me the choice because more
right?
of them are.
That makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yes, and that makes you more competitive if you're able to have that choice and you're able to have the credentials behind it.
Yeah.
Because again, if you've made that transition a couple of times this year, in the remote world, in the pandemic world, and therefore you're pretty adept at adapting. So showing that to an employer is a major
Yeah.
ordeal and makes you more competitive than anybody else. So you want to add one more thing, Anna, before we go on?
Yeah, we can move on. We could talk all day about this. It's such an
It is
important.
an issue, right? It
Yeah.
really
Oh,
is
it's
an
huge.
interesting
It's like
topic.
having the skill sets
Absolutely.
to work
Yeah.
remotely. You've got to know what those skills are, and you've got to be able to prove, like Mark
Yeah.
was saying, that you can make that transition and you know how to work effectively remotely. Because a lot of people don't know how to work effectively remotely, and it's going to be a
Well, you
huge
know what?
learning
Hey,
curve.
Go ahead, Jack.
can I tell you something? I can't agree more. I can just tell you from personal experience because we have everybody working remotely. I go into the office because I don't know, mentally, I feel better getting out of my house, going somewhere. It's hard for me to be as productive in the house for whatever reason. But now I have to do a lot of this stuff myself, and I stink at a lot of this stuff. So it's really stressful, seriously. So like when I first tried to go on Zoom calls, I'd screw them up. I'd do Facebook Lives, I mess them up. And so yeah, so you say that lightly about learning it. It's not so easy for some people, like my kids, right? It's so easy. They're young, so they can figure it out. My son's 21, my daughter's 19. You give them anything, they can figure it out. Me, not so much. Not so much. So it is. That's something that we don't talk about, but it's hard if you're
Well, and
working
it's not just
remotely.
that. It's like project management
Yeah.
skills and communication skills. Like your teenage kids are probably great with the tech, but how good are they at communicating where they are in what they're doing, right? Ask them to send you an
Yeah.
email and communicate what they're working on right now. It wouldn't be really good, right?
I work
So,
with them on that because that it is. It's definitely. I don't want to call out any generations, but there is a difference between certain generations in the way they are able to interact with folks.
Mark, you're muted.
I'm muted. So sorry. I completely agree with
Sissy,
everything
you
everybody
love
said.
this the dialogue. You're just so enthralled. Like
I,
you're like,
I was. I was riveted, you know.
We
But
should
I
have
think
just let him
all.
go.
but that is something, Hattie. I think you're onto something there too. It is a difference. So it's like, I wonder with the pen, does that bring this all out? You know what I mean? Like for instance, I
Mhm.
have to learn as a relatively older guy now, like all these things that I'm not comfortable with, and don't laugh at me, but like I get like a little pride when I figure some of this stuff out because like I'm doing it
Mhm.
myself, and like people
Right.
roll their eyes like, it's no big deal, but to me it's a big deal that I'm figuring out some of this technology stuff. But then, yeah, if you're working remotely, and as you pointed out, if you're a generation that's not used to having conversations face to face, not used to having phone calls, you just used to texting, that could be really uncomfortable and really awkward.
Mhm. My son
But I
won't
think
pick up
there's
the
a
phone
learning
and
curve,
call.
No, they don't. Right?
No,
right?
no.
They don't. It's
Right.
it's right.
But there's a learning curve, and ultimately each company is going to have their own tolerance as far as it could be who crosses the finish line first. But I think there's also people, your value has to be in such that you've got to know some of everything and be able to adapt. I think the issue may not be, do I know it, the whole deal, but at least I can adapt, and can I show that I am flexible and that I can adapt.
Mark, speaking of that, Hannah, Mark, I think we're all in the same position that we have kids
Hmm.
and they're a certain age. And I wonder too, from a social aspect. So my son's probably going to graduate not this year, next year from college. And
Hmm.
let's say it's the same. How weird is that going to be? You start a new job and you're going to be what, at home, where you get an apartment by yourself and you're on Zoom all day. Like, what does that do to that generation that's starting out? Where that's where, think about when you start out your career, you're meeting people. Let's say for someone like me who lives in the New York City area, you're in New York after work, maybe you go out with colleagues, you meet people, you have a social life. But what's it going to be like for that generation who's starting and it could be home on a couch with a Zoom?
Yeah.
What are their skills going to, interpersonal skills deteriorate? Are they going to have health, mental health issues? Are they going to have face isolation?
No, they'll adapt.
You th-
They'll adapt. They'll adapt. They'll have their friends in the way they want to have it, and they'll have their work where they might be able to be more outgoing. You go home to recover. You have that space, or better yet, if you're working remote, you have that space within your space, and you
So you're
know
gonna have to push yourself, is what you're
people
saying. You'd have to find a
people
way, like to say,
people
okay, I'm
they
not going to
will
sit here by
adapt.
myself all day long. Because think
Well,
of it. Yeah.
and I think the smart companies are going to realize, especially the companies that do a lot of younger hiring, or,
Right.
their new hire orientation is going to be much more than just that 5-day new hire
Yeah.
orientation. Companies, I think,
Mhm.
that really want to retain their employees are going to have to start doing more to give them outlets outside of the office place that are going to replace some of the things like the water cooler and
Yes.
the volunteer work they might do, and the other stuff. So
Right.
the smart
Yeah.
companies that are thinking about this are figuring out ways to make that happen, to create that culture and to keep it going and keep people connected.
So Hannah, how about that? Because that's a brilliant thought. Do you think then what would play out? You could have the places like Google that have deep pockets and Facebook deep pockets. They could do things to bring it together. But if you're a small, medium-sized shop and you can't, does that mean that the Googles and these places could get the best talent? Because if, let's say you're a young person graduating and you say, hey, I have a choice for working at ABC mid-sized small company, but I'm going to be working from home, or I could work for Google or Amazon or Apple, and they have all these cool things for me to come in and do. They're just going to get to suck up all the best talent.
Yeah. Well, haven't they always been the desirable company because of
Yeah.
what they're able to do? So that raises the bar for everybody else.
Yeah.
Or that the fact that they may have, I'm making up a name, WorkPod. I can work with people that are in my building that necessarily aren't in the same company that I'm working with, just so I can be around people.
They would have to
Or
do
better
that.
yet,
Yeah.
or better yet, I can go down to Starbucks, and I've done this where so and so is working on their business, so and so is working on their business, I'm working on mine. Or the same way with the companies, We all may have the same position or different positions, but we just like working together, and we can do that
I think
now.
a lot of people,
And
right?
be
You
from
just want
different
that
companies.
camaraderie. You don't want to be by
People
yourself.
people will build their own social construct, so to speak, when it comes to their space and their workspace. That then now they can work with people they actually like all of the time, as opposed to having to tolerate people that are narcissistic and space invaders. You just, I mean, there's a lot of quirks. I mean, there's a lot of quirks to the new workplace, but that's the new workplace that can be built just by saying, yes, let's do this together. You work for IBM, I work for Microsoft. Awesome. I mean, that probably, and I believe it already happens.
You
It
see
already
this?
happens.
Do you guys see this?
So
Where, to Mark's point, like I'll see, let's say I'm talking to a job seeker or what have you, they're home, and they have someone to talk to. They'll want to be on the phone forever because they're so happy to have another live human being. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's like, and you don't want to be rude and say, well, yeah, I got to go, because you could just feel it, like, oh, there's a different person I could speak to, a human being.
Yeah.
Right. And it's so odd.
And I'm an introvert, and even I find myself like clomming on to certain people. I'm like, oh, good, someone to talk to, right? So
like, I tell you something,
yes.
I look forward to having these, and that's one of maybe reason why I'm starting all these like podcasts and stuff, so I can talk to different people, because I'm literally in the office by myself. And I go stir crazy. I'm the guy who walks around the building. Hey, how you doing? Hey, I'm Jack. How are you? 'Cause
Right.
I like having people around me. I thrive on that better than just being like just by myself.
Right. I got a comment from Rick Stouch. Thanks, Rick for joining us. He said, I found that employees who live near where a company is located resent employees who can work remotely from who knows where. Also, a
Interesting.
company wants people to focus on what makes the company money, not wasting time learning a new way to work. I don't think it's really a waste of time. I think ultimately it's a decision, and your ability to adapt very quickly. If you can adapt very quickly, there's a lot of possibilities that are there out there. But to Rick's point, a company who might be a little bit behind the technology curveball are thinking all they'll do is just fraternize, and I don't think that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah.
People want to get their jobs. Now they may be able to get their jobs done a little bit more efficiently now that they're not distracted by meetings and all those. Not that meetings will completely go away, but at least at least the ability is right at your fingertips.
I think also Rick pointed out, Mark, and I don't know if you feel the same way. How it seems like there could be this built-in animosity that, hey, why is Mark in the Bahamas chilling by the beach? And because I live close to Manhattan, I got to schlep into Manhattan every day. This is not fair. So I think that's, Rick, I'm not sure if that's what you're alluding to, but that's an interesting, I never thought of that. That could create a lot of tension on how this plays out. Like, who has the ability to work in a really cool place, and someone who's schlepping in every day.
Yeah, well, we should move on to the next topics.
We can just talk about this all day, right? Mark, you brought up this topic first. We should have saved it, because we can just keep going on.
Move us along, Mark. Move us along. What's next?
35 minutes on one topic. Okay. So I was writing an article recently in the past week about raises, and can people actually ask for raises during this pandemic? Now, I know what the short answer is because I've been talking to experts and having this discussion, but I definitely want to toss it out to you guys as if that's going to be a big deal. And I think we covered part of it as far as how pay may be restructured. But I think there are companies that are kind of on the freeze. In fact, there's a SHRM study that's out there that there's like 35% of companies that said for 2021, we're either unsure or not willing to structure a pay raise at that particular time because the unknown is still out there. So I would love your thoughts, and I think this will help job seekers
If I were the
you know,
CEO of a company, I don't care what industry or how my company had been doing the last year, I would give everybody a raise. Everybody in the company for what they've had to go through. And if it meant that I had to take a pay cut, I would do that. Because this is what I know. Though my employees have worked their tails off. They've gone through a lot of emotional stress to try and survive in this work environment. I owe them something for that. Period end. That's my CEO hat.
okay,
And
now
we've
that we
seen
heard
that.
from Dan Price,
Yeah.
now that we heard from Dan Price, what do you think, Jack?
Right. We've seen that. We have some companies that like UBS gave out, I want to say a $500, bonus and what have you. Some of these trying to do things
Hmm.
to really show their appreciation. I'm going to get some hate on this because I think what I'm seeing now is it's really easy for companies to lay off people under the cover of COVID. Turn back the
Hmm.
clock a little bit. If you're doing a massive layoff, you know, the investors, Wall Street, the employees are going to be like, what's going on? What are you doing? It's not so easy to do. What I've noticed in COVID, and we all see it, it's a steady stream, even though people are getting more, the employment numbers are getting better, but you keep seeing that steady stream of major companies doing layoffs. And I think they're getting addicted to that, where,
Mhm.
hey, we could make these cuts and no one's really giving us a lot of pushback because we're like, hey, COVID, what are you going to do? We got to cut costs. And meanwhile, the CEOs aren't taking a cut. They're not giving up their bonuses, which is pretty messed up. But the rank and file are. So I think with that going on, it's really rough for people to go in, generally speaking, and say, hey, I want a raise, I wanted this, I wanted that, because you just want to keep your job. You don't want to do anything to wreck it. Now, that's a generalization because you could have people who have these amazing, awesome skills that are in hot demand, even in this market, and they could call their price. But for the vast majority of people, I think they're walking on eggshells because they don't want to do anything to jeopardize anything. And
But
that's
here's the thing.
unfortunate.
I hear you. Absolutely. I
And I hope
hear
I'm
you.
wrong, by the way, Hannah. I hope I'm wrong about that.
But I don't think you're all wrong. I
Yeah.
think but let me just quickly say that I'm familiar with the business and the staff is lean and mean. They've got like 4 people in the office, and this one person ended up doing everything. She put all of the content online onto the website. She didn't have website skills. She had to teach herself. She just put all the live stream videos on YouTube. She had never done that before. So she did a whole bunch of stuff that she never was being asked to do before. Her job description grew incrementally. For an organization not to reward her for that is not right.
That's a great point. That's such a good point. And it's interesting. I wrote something about that not too long ago. This guy, Jeffrey Dunlap, who is a billionaire, he's a CEO of a money management shop. And he was saying that, hey, I've noticed during this goes back a few months when we're like really in the teeth of things, that he found people exactly what you described. I'm finding some of these people, particularly younger people, stepping up and working really hard, going above and beyond. But then I'm noticing I'm not hearing from like these mid-level managers. And he's came to the decision, I think I don't need a lot of these people. I'm going to cut them off. And he said he was speaking to a lot of peers. They found the same thing. So I think, Patty, you're really onto something. I think for the people who step up and get noticed and really make a difference, they're going to stand out in this kind of environment, and they could get the raises, they could get the promotions, they could get all the accolades. And the ones who just like, where are they? It's going to be hard for them.
Well, I jokingly had mentioned Dan Price's name. If you guys didn't caught it or not, remember the guy that cut he has a financial company out of Seattle. He's the one that cut his salary and raised everybody else's salary up to $70,000 a year, and his company is still thriving. And I love it because I see his Twitter feed and his LinkedIn feed. He's trolling everybody else. He says, "Ha ha, you're laughing now." I said, "We're killing the game." But all in all, having said that, raises unfortunately are not automatic because you raised your performance and do these things. That doesn't mean that somebody's going to notice and take notice. So you may have to go and ask for that raise. So a question is that during this pandemic, is it appropriate to ask for a raise, or is it or is somebody tone deaf, or maybe you have done what Hannah talked about, and you have all these. You now have transitioned your position not only to do X, Y, and Z, but you also got the online content and is bringing website traffic and is bringing a good bit of chunk of business now. Where most people, they're kicking and screaming, still trying to get a website up, and it's now November.
So, Mark, yeah, here's the thing. I think now we're headed in almost into December, right? I don't care
Right.
when your annual review is. I think that people need to have a conversation with their manager just so their
Hmm.
manager understands everything that they've done. Right.
Right.
If you've done a lot of stuff, this is your chance to go sit down with your manager and bring them up to speed and say, I'd love to see what we could do about increasing my salary. It's a
Hmm.
question. It's starting the conversation. Depending on
Yes.
the industry, they may not be doing well. They may be in the
Hmm.
in the red. So it might not be that they're able to give you a raise right now, but maybe, oh, maybe they could say, let's do this. Let's make a deal so that we can give you a raise and we'll make it retroactive once we're back in the black, and we can make it
Hmm.
retroactive to this point when we're back in the black. Like, it's having that conversation and at least
Right.
having a mutual understanding, and not like this, well, I don't think I can. I want people to go get the answers to those questions and be proactive in sort of addressing that. And if the manager says, no, I can't do that, we'll never be able to do that, that's good to know, right? Because then
Yes,
you know.
because yeah, no is useful intel. Obviously, you know where the boundaries are, and I get that from Kwame Christian, who actually that's his thing. He does negotiation. He teaches it at Ohio University, Ohio State University. Is that no helps you? At least you now know what the where the
You know where you
boundaries
stand.
are,
Yeah.
and you know exactly where you
You know where you
stand.
stand.
However, it is not a bad idea if you have substantive work behind you to show that you've made these jumps when the company needed you. It's not, this is the time to ask, especially when they're visible, you can see it, and it's obvious, to use that as a way to plant seeds, so to speak. You know what I mean? You're doing this now, and you're making it known, and then your boss in turn can watch you, and also glean the value of it. And of course, you may have to put it right at his table in order for them to really see it.
Yeah. Hey, Hannah, I think you're right on the money with that, because maybe as a strategy, let's presume this is going to keep going on for a while longer. If they haven't
Mhm.
been doing it, sounds like what you're saying is, people who are watching this now, watch it later. It sounds like your strategy, which I think is really super smart, is that to go into your manager, your bosses, and keep them apprised of what you're doing. So I guess you don't wait till you want to ask for a raise or promotion, what have you, but you want to set the table and let know, here's what I'm doing, here's what my projects, and so on, and keep that communication open so they know. So the time you want to maybe ask for something, it's not from scratch. They already kind of been prepped for what you've been
Mhm.
up to, what you're doing.
Mhm.
Because people forget, you know what I mean? They forget, like, because the example you gave with that person who's doing everything, 4 months later, they may like, I don't really remember that, and then that person's like, what? I worked so hard.
Well, I think the other part of that conversation that needs to be had as well is that you also have to be very well aware of what the company is doing. Because if there are layoffs, if there are furloughs, eh, to ask for a raise, even if you've done it, may or may not be a very timely thing to do. And I think all it comes down to approach is that you may draw attention to the performance first, so that at least you say, hey, at least watch the performance and see how it gains momentum, and eventually, for most businesses, how it's profitable for them, whether it's going to be in time or it's going to be in cost. But ultimately, you can't be demanding for sure, saying that I deserve a raise because I did all this online work and you guys wouldn't exist without me. Probably is not going to be flying. Going to be, it's going to be seen more as tone deaf at this particular point in the pandemic.
Hannah, what do
Well,
you, as a career advisor, what do you coach people to do? Like,
I
do you
want
have?
I want people to have regular conversations with their managers about their
Absolutely.
performance. And most managers not most. A lot of managers are not good at having these conversations. But if you have an open dialogue and regular sit downs, conversations with your manager about what you're doing, where you have had achievements, where you've struggled, what you've overcome, this conversation of more pay becomes a little less critical. Like, because by the time pay should be coming up. Usually it's an annual review, but it shouldn't have to wait till an annual review, but usually that's when it does. But then you've been building this case. See, an employer and your manager needs proof to be able to justify that you should get more money. You can't just say because I say so. They have to document that, and they have to go to HR or finance and say, yes, this is why I want to give Hannah more money. So we want to give our managers the tools to make their life easy to give us what we want.
And that's part of the deal too. I think doing the research and being able to quantify it and qualify it is going to be
hmm
very key in being able to have that discussion. If you come in and say, I've been doing more work and your results are not visible, seeable, or even obvious, then they're going to look at you like, is this what only reason why you're working here? And they may, and if you're in a small company, it may be even taken personally, but because everybody's struggling, whether they're struggling by decision or by strategy or for the fact that they have to lay off some folks, you don't want to be the one that sticks out because you see people get walking out the door for the last time and you're asking for a raise. That's not the opportunity to do so. So I think all of that, all those discussions, I think, are going to be very much trending upwards coming up in 2021 because there is so much uncertainty and that there's so many people and so many businesses that have taken pay and had to cut their pay. I mean, our friend Mac Pritchard had to make that decision. If you ever listen to his story on some of the other podcasts, like several of them recently, I've heard probably all of what he had to say about how he had to, have people work 2 days a week, and then the state of Washington had to pick up the other 3 days through unemployment. I mean, there's a lot of creative ways that entrepreneurs had to make do, but I can't imagine one of his people say, well, I really need a raise right now when you're only working 2 days out of the week. So I think you have to be keen to what the company situation, hear the dialogue at large, and show yourself to be a contributor because you're working at that particular point. There's a lot of people who are not.
Well,
Go
and
ahead,
let me go
Hannah.
back to what sorry.
Jack said.
Sorry, Jack said in the very beginning. You sort of said, companies are using this COVID as an excuse to let people go, right? And I can see
Mhm.
companies using COVID as an excuse not to give people a raise.
Yeah,
I don't think not every company is doing poorly right now. We know that there are a lot of companies that are doing really, really well, or that really haven't been impacted that much at all by COVID. So you really have to say, okay, is this the company calling wolf, or are they really in financial trouble? Are they just laying off people because they think they want to whatever? I just want to make sure that people are not afraid just because the company is laying off people that they don't ask for more money. There may be other things going on.
absolutely. And I just want to read this comment from Robert Williams, who joined us late. Thanks for joining us, Robert. He said, at my previous bank, they changed recently from putting all your accomplishments in at the end of the year to throughout the year. That seemed to work a great deal better, which it should be something that, and I think some of the things I practice as a manager at times having quarterly reviews, having weekly what we call observations and things like that to put into place so that people are not caught off guard of what they're not doing wrong the whole year, because basically it becomes on the manager and looks bad for the company who's saying, you did all these bad things. Well, you've been doing these bad things all year. Now it matters. I say, now you want me to change your behavior? It becomes an insidious conversation. But all in all, I think the point being is that as you know, the professional, the individual professional, you got to initiate that conversation if your managers aren't, because they're not going to take the blame at the end of the year for your performance. You got to take the ownership and put it out there for everybody to see. So unless we have anything that's critical going on, I do want to hit this topic in our last few minutes together about college students and how they're going to prepare for 2021 as well. That's you know, we saw there were bailout plans, so to speak, by college universities that they had to make all these changes in March and April. They spent a couple of years you know, trying to figure out their strategies on how to get their students on track to graduate and help them with their job search. But now we got the beginning of the year, and the students may have to take a little bit more initiative for their own job search, and which has always been. But what would you say would be key advice and a key strategy for college students, and really even for just young people who are graduating from an institution of any type? What's the one thing they should be doing to help them with their job search coming in spring and summer of 2021?
Oh, you can go ahead.
Okay, so don't wait until the summer of 2021. You need to start yesterday, last week, last semester, last summer. Employers have always said this, and I think that we have not really amplified it enough. Employers want to hire students with experience, not students with degrees. So that's really what they are looking for. And the only way students can get experience is by having an internship or a co-op. Go create one, get one, work with your career center. There was that article that said a lot of companies are now offering virtual internships. That means you can get an internship almost anywhere in the world. Get internships, because that's real world work experience, and that will count more than your degree, period. Get an internship.
Yeah, Jack?
Let's see, I was saying for you to go first, not because I was being polite, but because you ever have a topic that like really like gets to you, so you can't think that clearly about it? This would be it. I'll tell you why. So my daughter's a sophomore. My son is kind of a senior, but he changed majors, so it might take a little longer. And I'm paying out a fortune for tuition. And there's Zoom calls, right? They're online Zoom calls. And the professors are 105 years old, and they're not taking the time to really know how to do it correctly. And it's horrible. And then we have to pay rent in a place he's not using because no one's there. It's a ghost town. So it's just, I can't think straight about it because it just drives me up a wall. And then the school that they go to, one of the big draws is they have a co-op, but they're not doing co-ops because of COVID. So it's really rough for the kids. It's really tough. And I think putting aside you can see my angst and frustration and agita with all this, is that, as you pointed out, you just have to kind of hunker down, get a game plan, just, like us grown-up adults have to do, you know what I mean? Figure out, how am I going to get out there? How am I going to be seen? How can I do a virtual co-op? How can I network? How can I market? How can I do? But they're going to have to work harder because the game has changed and it's rough. It's like my heart goes out to these kids, particularly from last year, who graduated, in the spring. It's like the rug was pulled out from under them, and it's really tough. And I'm very worried for this younger generation that you're not going to get up. A lot of them aren't going to have that going up that ladder, and they're going to lose out. And we know how it is. Then you get another year coming, and another year, and another year. So it's going to be really rough. And I think whoever graduated, in the spring, and who's graduating now, just going to have to try everything. I mean, it's going to test their mettle in a way that they're just going to have to really make their own breaks. And I'm not going to pretend as a father, what I'm going to do is that I have been doing, keeping my antenna open. Anyone who, I'm thinking of anyone who has, works in the area that he's going to graduate. I'm like, is there an internship? Is there a co-op? Because I'm not above that, why not? I mean, this is what, same way you help people out in the job search, because I think you just have to, you can't rely on how it used to be. You go out and you have people come in with career days, and either they bring in folks. It's really not like that. So to answer your question, man, this market it's gonna be really challenging for a lot of people. On the flip side, you could say maybe, you know what, maybe it's a good learning experience at a young age. You know, my kids it sounds like our kids are, you know, they went, even though they were little kids at the time, you know, 9/11, the financial crisis, all the drama, the elections and what have you, COVID. So maybe in a way, it makes them strong. You know, maybe in a way, you know, when adversity makes you tougher, you know, tough times make tough people. So it could be that some of these things will end up being good for them because they're gonna have to push harder. And then as they get older, they're gonna have really thick skin.
Yeah, mine are older than yours. I have one that's one about to work on his second master's, but during that time in his undergraduate, and I'm talking about my oldest one, he found all of his opportunities through networking. He basically was a freak about networking, and that's the kind of person he was. That's not to say that if you're not that kind of person, it's going to be a lot more of a challenge. But for him, not only was natural, but he found multiple internships and internships that paid. And that's probably one of the things that might be in the chasm, is that these virtual opportunities that you may create, I recommend making sure that you get paid for your time, just as if you were going into an office. Don't take free virtual work, kids. All right.
I don't know, Mark. At this stage, I think just to get something on the red, like I've had both my kids work for me for years, you know, particularly the summer holidays, so they know what it's like to be in office and that. So that's the good part. So I know that they have been acclimated to what the work world is like. And I did pay him, but then my kids, you know, I didn't pay him, you know, I have the money anyway.
Right.
But I think for the internship, I think for the generation, they got to do whatever just to get something on the resume, just to get experience.
And it's project work. Like, I don't know why we think an internship has to be this internship. It's a project. Go do a project for a company. You could sell your own skills and say, hey, I just finished a class in data analysis. I'd love to come in and analyze your data. Would you hire me to do that? That's an internship.
But I think, though, that's also volunteer work, in the sense that you're volunteering your time to do work. And that might be good for a certain section. But in the past, companies have taken advantage of these kids. And you know, they have.
You know what? I'm going to take your advice. So, wait, I don't mean to interrupt. You know what, Hannah? I'm going to tell him to do that, because that's a good. I like that idea. No, just to just go and say, hey, he's doing. Let's say in his case, he's doing corporate finance and data analytics, and maybe look for companies. We live in New Jersey. Look for companies around that say, hey, I did this. Do you need, even if it's not an official, internship or co-op, but I just want to get more experience. What do you need? And he's seen me, what I do for a living, and he's adopted the knowledge of, like, okay, you just got to try things. You know what I mean? You got to put things out there. If it works, it works. It doesn't work, but you got to ask. So to get out there. So this goes back to your initial question. So yeah, I like Hannah's idea. Like, you know what? You go out there and you try to say, hey, here's what I'm doing. Can I do something for you?
He had volunteer work, but he also had paid internship work as well. And there's nothing wrong with even toggling between the two of them. But one of the advice that I think that's going to be really important that they can control, college students can definitely take advantage of the resources they have, the career centers, and use informational interviews or business conversations.
Mark, don't even get me started on that either. See, this is a sore topic. That's why I wanted Hannah to talk first. Because like they're using COVID as an excuse. Well, yeah, we do something, but COVID, we don't have.
I'm saying, ultimately, I'm saying that you take what the defense gives you, so to speak. So if it's being able to have your web camera up and being able to have these conversations, use the resources that are there, you can start to have these conversations with professionals to the place you want to aspire. Have lots of them. I mean, there's no reason why a college student can't have 12 in a quarter or more. Some of them can even have 12 in a month. It doesn't matter. But I think ultimately, when you're starting to, you gain a lot more real world intelligence as how the world is working now. The classroom alone is not going to do it because they're giving you what's happened in the past. The informational interviews, the business conversations that you're able to have with somebody who's working in the field now is saying, this is how we're working now, this is how I adapted, and this is how you should think about adapting as well. That gives you all so much intelligence at this particular time to network and to get out there now, and also make the best of those relationships that you make through those interview sessions that you have. Of course, those are free and those are volunteer, but the payoff can be quite huge at the end. And I remember having a giant conversation where there was a Purdue student who said that, yeah, that's how it was able to get opportunities. Now, I've even had clients in the past when I had clients and was taking clients back in the day, they were able to toggle and use those times of information as a way to bridge to relationships, and even to a few this day have maintained those relationships. So, that's if you want to use something trendy, I'll leave it for last thoughts here because we are getting past our
Let me ask
hour.
you this for last one, Hannah, and I think there's value to being very open what we're talking about, because a
Uh-huh.
lot of people are going to watch this now, watch it, have kids, they may be young, they may be old, so it's relevant. What do you say as a career advisor, if you don't mind my asking? If you're uncomfortable, that's cool, but what do you say to your kids, like in terms of how
Because
to
I have
get into?
I have a freshman in college who
Okay.
just graduated from high school last year, and I don't know if I tell him it's all about who you know, building relationships,
Mhm.
and so he's going to be home for 2 months, maybe longer, this fall, and we're lining up. Visitations and meetings with people inside companies during that time right now.
It's a
Um,
freshman, so that's
yeah,
good. So
yeah,
she's starting early.
yeah.
Yeah,
Because
that's the way to
he,
start.
yeah, it
Yeah.
I
it's
think
got to
that
start
that's a,
freshman year.
Isn't
and
it
I
wild?
think
Like,
that's part of the lesson
yeah.
too, is that the earlier you start, the
Yeah.
payoff will be bigger at the end.
And maybe that's an answer to what you were asking, Mark. It's like, it's because it's different. The game is changing. Who knows how long this goes on? And to start them early, like you start as a freshman, so that's great. So the time you graduate, you're used to speaking to people,
Yeah,
used to
yeah.
networking, and it
Not
just
only are you
becomes
used to
natural.
people, but can you imagine the freshmen that started during the informational interviews? They've hooked up with alumni. They've even had internships through that. By the time they're seniors, they have the intelligence. Even if they want to switch careers, they
Yeah,
know they
yeah.
have real world information about how to, as opposed to, again, relying on the books and the classroom environment, which often these days is probably light years behind because we have a pandemic. The books don't address a pandemic these days.
Yeah.
So, I think to get that real world knowledge now and throughout, and knowing how to pivot is essential. It should be actually, I think it should be mandated
You should
that
have
they
in
do
schools, right?
information.
Hmm.
Yeah,
They should be
yeah.
doing them, and then career services keep them accountable to those kind of things. I think it should be a
Yeah.
thing, and
Hmm.
not particularly just merely a suggestion that this is what you want to do if you want to get to this place.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for the rest of you for joining us. A lot of you, Victoria, Christine, didn't get to your comment. Sorry, Christine, but you know the deal.
Yeah.
Michael, Robert, a lot of you who've joined us, thank you so much. Please share this show with your network, and the payback will be great for you. Thank you, Hannah, very much for joining us for this
Thanks,
hour
Hannah.
of
It was
power
great seeing you
assist.
again.
I feel
Thanks,
like it
guys.
was church somewhat. I want to say hallelujah sometimes. Looking for my tambourine. But I think this was great, Jack. Thank you as
Thank you, my friend.
always.
Thanks.
We'll be back next
Excellent.
week,
Thanks, Hannah.
possibly with another guest,
It's good to see you again.
and hopefully you all found this very valuable to your job search and for what's coming up in 2021. We'll be back.